Derrick Day, and he is.
I'm Aaron Tomlinson.
And this is Freeology Friday, and we are back, or I'm back here in Oklahoma after a week being in San Diego and then in Dallas. And just for the record, I have to say for all of you San Diegans out there, I fucking love San Diego. I mean, fucking absolutely love it. If I had my, if I had the money, that's where I'd live. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. That's where I would live. But anyway, good to be back. Had a fantastic week, and so before we get into the subject tonight, what's in the glass, Aaron?
So I made up my own drink tonight. I don't know what to call it. I'll take suggestions in the comments from people. But I took some watermelon and muddled it up really good, and then I put some chamoy. I don't know if people know what chamoy is, but it's a Mexican condiment that is basically pickled fruit juice. And my son absolutely loves it. And you eat it with fruit, and it goes really good with mango. Watermelon is something they say it goes good with. So I put some chamoy, watermelon, and then I topped it off with some gin.
Wow. I was today years old when you told me about chamoy. And I thought I was a citizen of the world, but you told me something, man. I'm like, we talk about growing in real time. That was a real time
Yeah,
growth moment.
yeah, it's pretty good stuff. He loves it. He's got a big, huge bottle of it. So
Yep. So as far as oh, let me see. I said what I've got the Bird Dog chocolate whiskey that you introduced me to,
yeah,
and I mixed that with some Bullet bourbon.
right on.
There it is.
It's a good mix.
Yep, it's a really good mix. But so tonight's subject, you want to introduce it? You want me to introduce it,
I'll
or
let you
what do you want
introduce it. You go ahead and open it up.
okay, all right, okay. So uh, I pinged Aaron, and normally we kind of connect a little bit sooner than last day, but I reached out to him and said, hey, what do you want to talk about? And he's like, well, I don't really have anything, and I said, well, there were two things that really resonated with me this week because well, actually there were three F's. Family was one, friendship was another, and freedom was the third. And I could have talked about any one of those today, but freedom is the subject that we're going to talk about. And this is what I want to say, that when we talk about freedom, freedom is a big thing if you're an American. If you're an American citizen, freedom is the thing. It is what this country is ostensibly built on. It's what it's all about, right? It's having the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom to, to choose different things. I mean, it's all about freedom, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But this was something that really blew my mind this week because I realized, and here's the thing, if you peel back the layers of the onion of your life, right, you're gonna find places where you're really strong and places where you're really weak, or you'll find out where you're really free and where you're really bound,
Yeah.
right? And so I discovered this week that I was in fucking bondage.
Mm.
And the sad part is that it was a bondage of my choosing.
Mm. Mhm.
I created my own chains and defined the terms of my own slavery.
Mm.
And and what I learned was that if I'm going to really explore life, I have to find these places of bondage and eliminate them. I have
Mhm.
to emancipate myself from
Mhm.
these shackles, right? And nobody could do it for me. And this is another thing about freedom, right? Because part of our American history is they say, well, we fought the Revolutionary War to free us from England, and then we fought the Civil War to free the slaves, right? And in reality, neither of those are really true, right? But we create these romantic narratives
Right.
about things, and most of us create romantic narratives about our freedom, that we think that we're free. But when you look at your career choices, your financial choices, your emotional choices, your spiritual choices. That if you look at that, if you look at it holistically, all of these different aspects of your life, you'll find that you are more in most people. I'm not saying you, Aaron. Most people are in bondage than are not.
Hmm.
And so I thought, and this was me, this is what I thought up until this week. I said, I had one thing that I needed freedom in, and that's money, financial freedom.
Hmm.
Guess what, Aaron? I was wrong. There are a couple of areas where I'm still in bondage, but I discovered one, and I said, after this week, I'm not going to be in that bondage anymore.
That's
So, so that's kind of like when I told you, we were talking about subjects, and I said, those three F's, but freedom resonated with you. So now that
yeah.
I've said my piece, I want to know, why does freedom resonate with you, Aaron, as
Yeah.
a topic?
Well, yeah. So it's different, but we'll find our common ground here. I love what you said, though. I don't want to just, get into what I was thinking about this week, but I love what you said about, because bondage, a lot of it's mental, right? We have barriers, boundaries that we
Yep.
keep in our thinking
Which we
that
talked about
prevent,
boundaries last week.
yeah, that
Yep.
prevents us from choosing our own autonomy, choosing our own happiness, choosing to, in other words, we're not free to make the choice because we've already made up our mind that that choice is not available to us. That's what I'm trying to
Yep.
say.
Yep.
So I was talking with Julie about it this week, and some things came up from the past and people that are upset with us for the changes that we've made in our lives, specifically that I'm not pastoring anymore, and that, I'm not who they want me to be, or who I was, and
Yep.
not even close to the version that I was 7 years ago, right?
Yep.
And people got mad at us for that. And so I've been thinking about, we were talking about the freedom to change your mind.
Ooh. Yes.
The freedom to change your mind, the freedom to grow. And, we talk about hurt versus harm all the time, but people get hurt, people get upset. I don't think there's hurt or harm. It's like people take a snapshot of you in their brain,
Yep.
and they hold this snapshot of you, and they have this idea. Oftentimes, I think those of us that are in leadership, or this happens a lot in romantic relationships too, maybe,
Yep.
there's an idealized version of you that's held in the person's brain, and you're moving away from that, right?
Yep.
And they can't tolerate that you're not matching their inner image of you anymore. And so they try to pull you. I'm thinking of Al Pacino in Godfather 3, just when you
Yeah.
think
He
you're
keeps
out,
pulling me in.
they pull you back in. And so I just thought about, it's easy to see that pattern in other people and criticize that pattern in other people when you're on the side of it where you changed your mind.
Yeah.
But also allowing people the freedom to change their mind. And that's an interesting kind of bondage. We're going to hold you to where you are because you said this in the past, or
Mm.
you did this in the past,
Yeah.
or, I kind of think I have a different take, to use scripture. Not that it matters for this program, for sure, but Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. He said, don't swear by anything, right?
Yep.
And I think that gets twisted and distorted, that people think, well, once you say yes to something, you have to follow through on it. And that was a big thing for me. If I said something, I had to have follow through with what I said. Otherwise, I
Mm.
wasn't a man of my word,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
And that's an idealized version of me, right? And so, I've sometimes told people they're going through divorces because they married really young or whatever, they married the wrong person. But especially if they married young, they're middle aged, starting to go through something, they've changed a lot. Don't hold yourself in bondage to a 19-year-old's decisions.
Mm. Yeah.
You're 40 something. You don't have to be bound to decisions that you made when you were 19. But I think we kind of think that way sometimes, especially if we strive to be people of integrity, that we don't have the freedom to change our mind. And when we do change our mind about something, people get upset with that. So I think a big element of freedom is the freedom that we both give to ourselves and to other people, to change their
Yes.
mind and not try to hold them to some former version of themselves.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because you know, to free true freedom means not just receiving freedom, but also extending freedom, right? So what I don't want to do, or what no one should do, is to take these snapshots of people and put them in some sort of frame,
Right.
right? And say, okay, this is my expectation of Aaron, this is my expectation of Derrick, forever and ever, amen. And what happens is that once you galvanize an image externally, right?
Right.
That you set this image in stone and you say, this is the way it is. This is the way I'm going to look at it forever and ever, right? I think that people run the risk of galvanizing themselves, right? Because your external projection is usually a reflection of what's inside, right? So the people who had this reflect, or this image of you as pastor, and they're mad because you're not pastoring, it's because they have this image of themselves as being part of your congregation,
Yep.
right? So
Hmm.
they're not able to release that. And because of that, not only are they not free, but they're not willing to extend the freedom to you.
Right.
So watch this. Freedom of choice. I mean, and we talk about this in the context of abortion, you know, uh,
Hmm.
reproductive rights or sexual freedom. People, I think, and this, this may not be 100% true, but I think that a lot of times that when people project a visage of bondage,
Hmm.
that it's really a reflection of their own bondage, right? So
Yep.
so this was a thing. Let me give you an example. This was something that I had to get around. I had to get over, right? Because I used to be horribly homophobic,
Hmm.
right? And and somebody said to me, "Well, you're probably homophobic because you're really a closeted homosexual." Now, that's a I don't know if you would call that a red herring or a non sequitur, but that's a logical fallacy because one doesn't really relate to the other. But I had to go back and evaluate this. I said, okay, do I have any repressed sexual desires for
Hmm.
people of the same sex? I had to really ask myself because that now, if I do have any sexual desires toward same sex, then I'm being a hypocrite of the highest order of magnitude,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So once I discovered that that's not my issue, because I'm almost heterosexual to a fault.
Right.
But it was like something I had to go back and look at. And then so abortion, right? Abortion, another one. You want to repress the freedom of women to choose autonomy in their bodies, right?
Right.
Well, moment of transparency. I had a few abortions in my wake. Of course, not me having them, but me being a party to them.
Right.
And so I thought what I discovered was is that part of my whole pro-life paradigm was this guilt
Mm.
that
Yeah.
I had for the decisions to terminate a pregnancy that I was involved in.
Right.
Okay. So, and again, I wanted to restrict the freedom of somebody else because of bad decisions that I made, or decisions that I personally didn't agree with, or they didn't resonate with me in this frame of life. So if you made a really really good point. Now I want to stop here and unpack this as I kick it back to you. Is that um, if I'm going to say I want to be free, I want to be free to say what's on my mind. I want to be free to do the things that I want to do without causing harm to others. I want to be free, you know, free to choose what I choose sexually or whatever the choice is, right? Financial choices, choices with a long term mate or whatever. I have to be prepared to extend that freedom to others because if I'm not, and this is the thing, if you are not willing to extend freedom to others, freedom to change your mind, freedom to change your appearance, freedom to change your habits, freedom to change what you say, right? I mean, there are whole we can peel back freedom in many different ways. But if I'm not willing to extend those same sorts of freedoms to others that I want to experience for myself, I'm really not about freedom. I'm about, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah. I think as I think about this, I think that this is where that self growth and that self development, or the way I would term it, is living life from the inside out more
Yep.
than from the outside in. There's always interaction and interplay between those two realities. But
Yep. Which Aaron has some really good teaching on that too. By the way, guys, make sure you go out to his YouTube
thank
channel
you.
and get that stuff about living from the inside out.
Yeah, thanks. Um, so too many times we're looking for meaning or pleasure or love, what purpose, whatever we're looking for, whatever our unmet needs are. We have to learn how to fulfill those for ourselves through our own autonomy in appropriate ways.
Yep.
What we do too often is we gravitate towards what's out here. So you mentioned financial freedom.
Yep.
So I'm tied to a job, and that job is my source
Yep.
of supply, right?
Exactly.
And that may be true in the moment. I feel like the preacher's coming on me. Is your job your source, or is God your source?
And where's my organ?
But regardless, there's a principle there. My job's supplying my need at the moment, but that doesn't mean there aren't 1,000 other sources
Right.
that I could pull from employment wise to provide for me, right? But that requires my own autonomy to make changes and take jobs that I want and say no to jobs that I don't want. And
Right.
there's a lot that goes into that, but I'm trying to make the point about externals. So I think what happens in relationships is that people are organizing because we're social emotional beings. We have to, even the most introverted ones among us still need that social emotional interaction and need met, right?
Yep.
So we organize our world internally based on our beliefs or our unmet needs. And so when a person comes along, we take that snapshot, they fit into our life, and we give them access to our life more often than not because there's some need, want, or desire that's being fulfilled there. And so we organize our relationships, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You and I have a very close relationship. We can be very open and honest with each other, but that's after 3 years of interacting and getting to know each other and stuff like that. I would never talk to a stranger the same way that I talk with you. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So we go with this work into these relationships to let those boundaries that we talked about last week become closer to the source, if that makes sense.
Yep.
The sacred ground that we talked about last week.
Yep.
And all that stuff. And so we've organized everything in a certain way. And then all of a sudden you completely deviate, or a person in my life stops playing the role that they were playing for me in their life, or they do something that causes me to question the internal picture, the internal representation that I have of them, right? And that can throw things into chaos depending on the level of intimacy. And I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. I'm talking about like intimacy, the level of closeness that I allow people in my life. That can bring a lot of emotional pain. But again, that emotional pain is there because, so in other words, unless you're incredibly narcissistic, Unless you think you are the center of the universe, you should never have the expectation or the belief that people are there for you in the sense that you get to organize them and fit them in, and your needs being met or your whatever it is being met is the primary important thing, right? But again, to come back to what I was saying, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but it's this internal organization. One of the reasons that people stay in toxic relationships is because they don't really believe they have the ability to go out and create a better relationship.
Yep.
And so they're clinging to this toxic relationship. They're clinging to this toxic person because this is all I could ever get.
Yep.
And I don't want to go through the discomfort and disorganization of my social life if I let this person go. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so we don't have the right to do that to people. If we do that to people, then they're just pieces on a game board. They're just toys that we take out and play with once in a while, depending on the level of intimacy and relationship that we have. And so I don't mind that I'm discarded. I had someone when we were shutting down our church, someone's like, this group of people is really upset. And I'm like, well, of course they are. Of course they are. And I don't blame them at all. I'm the one that, was on the plane to Dallas and hopped off in Denver and got on the plane to Atlanta. They wanted to go to Dallas. I don't fault them at all for staying on the trajectory to Dallas.
Yeah.
But my plane's now going to Atlanta.
Right. And they can't be mad because you changed your itinerary.
Exactly.
Right.
Just find another plane to Dallas or whatever, or let me get off your plane and get on this plane. And don't try to mob me and pull me back or be mad at me and start rumors about me and say hateful shit about me because you didn't like that I got on the plane to Atlanta.
And let's stop here and talk about that, right? Because is it right? Is it fair for you to be upset with someone because they decide to change their itinerary?
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole thing about life is that the only thing that's consistent in life is change.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you have to be willing to undergo change yourself and also be willing to accept that others are undergoing change.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think about this, like in the funeral business, right? They have a term that when they're preparing a body for viewing, they call it setting the features.
Right.
And so whatever the expression or the visage is at that moment, that's what it's going to be, right? It's not going to change. And so what it is that we expect people, I mean, we actually become virtual undertakers in the lives of other people. That we set their features according to our liking, according to our taste, according to where we are at this particular time. And that gives us comfort, right? Because they are what we expect them to be. But you can't set features on a living being. It's you have to understand that this person is going to undergo metamorphosis, reinvent themselves, go through incremental changes, so on and so forth. And the thing about freedom is understanding that, okay, I want to be free to change. I want to be free to change my mind. I want to be free to change my speech. I want to be free to change the music that I listen to. I want to be free to change my political ideology. But I get mad when people around me try to change in similar ways.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, again, it's like this analogy that you used about changing the itinerary, and you've used this before, and I love it. It's like if I'm on a plane to Atlanta, we're all in a group, but our connection is in Dallas. And you say, you know something? I think it's I think it's going to be cool to get off in Dallas. And everybody else is mad because you know, in their mind, you're ruining their trip.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're not asking you what are your Aaron, what are your needs?
Right.
Because you might say, well, I need to get off at Dallas because I need some fucking barbecue. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I need to be able to make that change. And the other thing too is that, and it's not an unreasonable expectation to ask that others are accepting of your change.
Mhm.
And that's the problem. I mean, you know, like when we talk about freedom, um, Aaron, I mean, you've hit on some really good shit here tonight, man. I'm sitting up here taking mental notes. Um, uh, you have to. It's not enough for you to say, okay, I want to be free to do this, but what happens when the people around me change, right? What happens? You know, I think about this like my kids. My sons are all type 1 kind of personalities. They're very outgoing, very expressive, very take
Mhm.
charge kind of
Mhm.
guys. And you know, for most of their lives up to this point, you know, I've been responsible for their care and their feeding. I've been responsible for, you know, their protection and all of that stuff. But now I watch them do things that, and sometimes they really, I pat myself on the chest, right? And sometimes I'm like, what the fuck, right? But the thing that I have to remember is that I didn't bring robots into the world. I brought human beings like
Right.
myself. And I'm going to say this, and then I'll kick it back to you, right? Because I have one son that's a namesake,
Mm.
Ducey, right?
Right.
And he's Derrick Eugene Day the second, right?
Mhm.
And I had to be faced with something at one point. You know, I said, what if Ducey decides he doesn't want to be that anymore, right? So like, you know, a lot of people don't know this is that Muhammad Ali was actually Cassius Clay the third,
Right.
right?
Yep.
His dad had a little dynasty going. He was junior. Cassius is the third. His dad was the first senior, right? And then here he comes and he says, you know, Clay is not my name. That's a slave name. I want to be known as
Mm.
Muhammad Ali.
Wow.
You know what does what you know? And here's the interesting thing about this is that by every account, um, Muhammad Ali's parents were disappointed with their son's decision,
Sure.
but they supported him.
Mm.
See, they gave him the freedom. In other words, I've known people who have embraced Islam and have shed their names for a Muslim attribute, and and their parents shun them
Yeah.
for life.
Yeah.
But when you and let's say this, and let me say this, and I'll kick it back to you, right? That love, right? See, this is where you know people talk about being Christian or being spiritual, and they talk about love, 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 love. Everything is love. If we just get the love thing right, everything will be okay. But I don't know if that's entirely true or not anymore. Because you can love someone which says, I have empathy and compassion for you, but I may hinge how I manifest that love to you based on a decision that you make.
Yeah.
You marry someone I don't like. You change your name. You move somewhere. You take on a job, or you go outside the family business, right? Okay, you know, in that case, what you're doing, I mean, when you make these decisions that I'm going to withhold my love
Yeah.
based on your action, based on an attribute that you've embraced, am I truly loving?
Mhm.
And then, you know, if you say, well, you know, I I claim to love you. And this was another thing. I got to say this real quick because I've dealt with this. Like I had people that came out to me, right? And and at that point, there was a decision that I had to make. I said, okay, if I can't deny or I can't withhold my love for them based on this decision that they make. I have to not only accept this, not only tolerate this, but I've got to celebrate this because this is who they are,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you have to give people the freedom. Well, two things. One is to explore because there are some people that explore and they don't change.
Right.
You know, like there are people who flirt with atheism and don't become atheists.
Right.
There are people that flirt with spirituality and don't become mystics,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so even if you're flirting with something, I have to not only celebrate your exploration, but I also have to celebrate your destination.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I love that. That's a good tagline. Um, so two things I would bring up. We tend, and I'm going to bring religion into this and how religion
oh, what happened?
impinges on our freedoms, but th- we tend to treat people in our society, especially what I would call peripheral people, as objects rather than as humans. You said it
Ooh,
exactly right, as robots.
yeah,
Perfect example is the waitress or the waiter,
good
um,
example.
or the flight attendant. Like, how many of us really sit there and think about the flight attendant and think, I wonder what her life or his life is like? Where do they live? What do they have a family? What do they care about? What are they going through? Like, we don't give any of those thoughts to that. They're just there to serve us drinks and be nice to us while we're on the flight and put up with us when we're pissed because there's a 2 hour rank delay on the tarmac or something,
Yeah.
right? Same thing with the waitress. I have certain pet peeves about food service, and I caught myself the other day with a young lady just hitting a pet peeve. Like, my pet peeves are when you ask us if we're ready to order and we're not quite ready, and then you don't come back for 15 minutes. Like, we just needed a couple more minutes, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like you're swamped, but like we just needed a couple more
Yeah.
minutes. And there's 5 families in the restaurant and we haven't seen you for 15 minutes. That's a pet peeve.
Yeah.
Or that and the check. So at the beginning of the meal and the end of the meal, at the beginning of the meal, I'm hungry. End of the meal, I'm ready to go. And you don't bring the check for 15 minutes. Like, that used to, for me, that would drop your
Your
tip
tip. Yep.
by percentage. Like,
Yep.
I'm a generous tipper, but if you could do everything right, refill my drinks, be polite, get the meal out, send it back, whatever. But if you are 15 minutes late with the check or something, I'm just like, it's a pet peeve of mine, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in my younger years, before I got a hold of this concept, really, to be honest, um, I might be known to, assert myself in ways that weren't appropriate.
Me too.
and and so now that this happened this week, and even then, I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and give the full tip because I need to be able to see people not as objects, not as robots, not as
Mhm.
there to serve me, but as human beings that have a
Yes.
life and have goals and
Yes.
have dreams and have purpose and all this other stuff. Now, so this is where, like, with peripheral people, your pastor, your mailman, your um, we could go, the list could go on and on, right? Now, some people make objects of their kids and their spouses, and usually we label those people as narcissists.
Yeah.
But I think you get the point. I'm kind of getting off away from the idea of freedom, but I think people are held in bondage. This is where it connects. I think people are held in bondage to what everybody else is going to think if I do thus and so. I really want to do thus and so, but everybody else is going to judge me for it. Everybody else is going to think this of me for it.
Yep.
And that's a powerful thing. And we tend too often to keep ourselves from experiencing freedom because we're locked into those kind of mental frames. So that's the first point I want to get. Second point is this. Let's bring religion into the discussion. It is theology, right?
Absolutely.
So here's the problem. Jeez. We have so many categories. In fact, you cannot be religious, and I'm using it in the true sense of the term. You cannot be religious without putting people in certain categories, because religion itself is a category that you are identifying with.
Yep.
So I'm saying, so you already put yourself into this category. I'm a Christian. I'm a Baptist. I'm a Pentecostal. I'm a Word of Faith. It like watch the categorization. In order to be, would have considered myself at one point, let's just say a grace preacher, right?
Yep.
Well, grace preaching, that's a category.
Yep.
But it's a subcategory, typically, of the charismatic movement.
Right.
Which is a subcategory of Christianity, which is a category of religion that separates you from everybody else. So if you're deeply religious, you cannot help but encounter people in your life that fit into that same category. Now, this doesn't have to be religion. You can do this with any subculture, right?
Yeah.
I'm going back a few generations. I'm a beatnik. I'm a hippie.
Yeah.
I'm a Gen Xer. I'm a millennial. I'm an emo. I'm a goth. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then I want to relate to people that fit into those same categories, right?
Right.
And that category, although it was chosen by that person, there may come a point in time in their life that category becomes restricting to them, right?
Yep.
But we aren't even conscious of the fact that we're doing this. So let's just take Christianity, right?
Yep.
Let's forget even the subcategories. Let's just take Christianity. Typical, heaven, hell. I'm not talking to the progressive people tonight, I guess, but good, evil. It's very dualistic. There's children of light and children of darkness. There's the children of God who are in the world but not of the world, and the whole world lies in the sway of the wicked one.
Yep.
The God of this age has blinded the mind of unbelievers. So there's believer, unbeliever category, right?
Yep.
So I have all these categories going on, and I have all these powers and layers of belief, all of these powerful layers of belief around each one of these categories. If you're not following Jesus, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
If you're not following Jesus, you are not a child of the light. You have turned to the darkness.
Yeah.
You either have the Spirit of God in you, or you have the spirit of the world in you, or you have the Spirit of God in you. And if you're really fanatical, you have the spirit of Belial or the devil inside of you. So now, when your behavior changes, when your beliefs change, when your speech changes, when you move outside of that category, now all these other categories that I have you in, they have to adjust. It's like a baby mobile, those mobiles that you put over the baby crib that spin around and interact with one another. Well, you're part of that mobile, right? So when in that person's brain, so when you spin the other direction, all those categories have to shift and adjust, and we have to put you in a different category now.
Yep.
But what does that mean when you're in the different category? It means that you are lost. So in other words, I have a version of you that's the saved you, that adheres to the creeds or adheres to the statement of faith or goes to church, pays your tithe, prays, seeking God's will, whatever it is, right? Yeah. All this meaning. So when you come out and say, like in your case, I'm an atheist, now all those categories have to, like the whole system, I have to figure out where to put you. And I'm going to put you in categories that are layered with meanings. So if you went from being a pastor to being an atheist, then in my mind, you were never really saved if I'm on the once saved, always saved bandwagon.
Yep.
In my mind, you turned away from God. So now you're a reprobate and there is no repentance for you if I'm in the hyper Pentecostal holiness movement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now the devil has deceived you. So do I want to, metaphorically, dance with someone who's dancing with the devil?
Right.
If it happened to you, it could happen to me. So all this stuff is going on inside a person's head, right? So of course they're going to push you aside. Of course they're going to push you
Mm-hmm.
out of their life, because now you've become, because of all the frameworks, now you've become a threat. You switch teams.
Yeah.
You went from playing for the Broncos to playing for the Raiders.
Oh my God. There's a metaphor.
Bronco fan did that analogy, right? But or now it probably should be, you went to playing from the Broncos to playing for the Chiefs. But you see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so it's these mental constructs that people are relating to. They're not even relating to you. They're not
Yeah.
even relating to me. We're not even relating to each other. We're relating to the mental construct. And you fit as a pastor. I fit as a pastor. Other
Mm-hmm.
people fit as Christians in their families. I want my kids to be saved. I want my children. I want to see what's heaven going to be like if my kids aren't there. And you just signed your contract to hell.
Mm.
So could I subconsciously then be alienating the black sheep of the family, the prodigal son, the lost person in my family? Could I subconsciously be alienating them because I don't want to be disappointed in heaven that the person that I loved and tried to raise? And then how does that reflect on me? What kind of parent was I? Was what the Bible says: raise up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old,
Or,
they should not depart from it.
or that the man of God should control his own household.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of this stuff is well intentioned, but this is where religion messes up relationships and causes us to actually deal with a false self, deal with a false person, not the real person, but the image and category and story and meaning that we have applied to the person, the character that that person now plays in
Yeah.
our story,
Right.
the team they now play for in our minds.
Yep.
And this is what prevents people, to bring it back to freedom, this is what prevents people in those systems from making choices that they really want to make or getting the freedom that they really want to get, because what's that going to mean to them when they've been put on the outside
Yeah.
of all this stuff? And if they're dealing with their own doubts and their own, like me, I've shared on here before, and I'm almost done, Derrick. I know I'm kind of rambling, but
Dude, you're good.
when I shared on here before, going to a metaphysical fair and thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get a demon, like you're battling that stuff too.
Yeah.
And so your choice might be, this role that I'm playing has created a box for me. This role that I'm playing has created a jail for me. Like you said at the beginning, I've forged the chains of my own bondage, but at least I know the jailers. At least I get 3 squares a day. At least I know the routine. At least I know
Okay,
the
so
pattern.
that's what's called being comforted by your chains.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I can't make the choice to be free, because what am I giving up? I chose it at some point. At some point, it met needs in my life, or I wouldn't have chosen it. At
Right.
some point, it fit me, or I wouldn't have fit into it.
Yep. So I think about this, like you mentioned religion, and since we went there, let's go there, right?
Yeah.
um, the word religion in the Latin,
Mm-hmm.
ligere, means to bring into bondage, right?
Yep.
Re is to do it again or to do it iteratively. So religion in and of itself is to bring into bondage, right? And I always trip out on people that they say you can only find true freedom in Christ.
Yeah.
I used to find that horribly oxymoronic
Yeah.
because if I'm bringing myself into this bondage, then that means I'm not free. And let me take another step, right? That when Jesus found the man in the Gadarenes, and he asks, "Who are you?" And he says, "We are legion, for we are many." Right? So let's look at that word legion. Legion is a word that means conscript. That, in other words, I sacrifice my freedom to be in the army of my liege,
Mm,
right?
wow.
Like liege lord, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm saying that if I adhere to some religion, then I by default am placing myself in bondage. And I'm doing it in a public sense. I'm not doing it privately. I'm expressing to the world my manifestation of bondage to a thing. So this is like one of these things that when I used to preach, you know, this was one of those hidden meaning things of the Bible, right? And when he said, "We are legion, for we are many," we have conscripted, or we are self-conscripted to this mentality, this manifestation, this ideology, this philosophy. And so when you say like, and this is funny because I've found so many people that they say, well, I've ditched the Bible and I've ditched Christianity, but I cling to Christ. Well, how did you know about
Yeah.
Christ
Come on. Come on.
outside of, the Bible? How did you know of Christ outside of the religious paradigm? So what you're saying is that I'm assigning myself an image of
Hmm.
freedom without actually giving myself freedom, because I'm really it's like one of those things where um, how the plantation owners were able to take advantage of labor after slavery. People would say, I'm a sharecropper.
Mm.
So I'm tied to the same plantation that I was. I'm working this under the same conditions that I was, but I give myself the illusion
Yeah.
of freedom, saying that I get to share in the proceeds of the cropping.
Right.
But in reality, sharecropping was just slavery light,
Mm.
right? Less calories, less filling.
I see Bob Euchre when you say it. I don't know why.
But no, that works because
I'm dating myself.
no, man, I love Bob Euchre was great. I love him. Must be in the front row.
Yep. Sorry. Go ahead. It's
No,
good.
no, it's okay. But we're having a moment. This is a bonding moment.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point is that I'm getting at is that there are people that they will say, well, I hate religion, but I love Jesus. Well, Jesus is just another expression of religion, right? So what you're saying is that I really love religion, but I'm hypocritical about it.
Hmm.
So I want basically I want to put a candy coated shell on this rabbit turd that I'm about to eat. I mean, that's really what it is. So you talked about religion and and freedom, because like if you say that I am religious, then you're saying by it's so funny. They say, okay, that I ascribe to the Christian religion, but I'm free because of Jesus. When you don't understand uh, word meanings, when you don't understand etymology, right? You say things like that because it sounds pious, it sounds faithful, but when you say it to someone who understands etymology, who understands cultural context, who understands the basically the overarching premise of what you're saying, now this person is going to say, "What the fuck are they saying?"
Hmm.
Right? And that's a challenge. But let me bring this back to freedom, because let me say this, Aaron. Let me say this. Let me use you as an example. Right?
Okay.
in my opinion, you are a person that absolutely epitomizes freedom. Now,
Mm.
let me explain why I say that, right? Because you will use a Christian uh, paradigm. You will use a scripture as a guideline,
Hmm.
but then you'll take it and you'll use something like quantum physics, or you'll use something like mysticism, or you'll use shamanism, right? And you fluidly navigate between these things.
Hmm.
And this is not foreign to you. You
Right.
do this, you're adept at doing this. You demonstrate an agility for this, right? So you're able to go from one to the other and basically pick and choose. And so I was talking with a friend of mine this week, and I was saying, like Bruce Lee said, be like water.
Yeah.
That if water is poured into the kettle, it becomes the kettle. If it's poured into the teacup, it becomes the teacup. If it's poured into the pipe, it becomes the pipe. Whatever water is constrained by, it becomes that, right? But water never changes its basic nature, and it's able to adapt to whatever container or conduit that it's in or flows through, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so 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 that to me, right? This is my moment to celebrate you,
Thank you,
right?
sir.
Because that is what you do. Now, me, on the other hand, I tend to be a little bit more rigid in my beliefs.
Yeah.
In other words, I say, well, there is no God, and that's that, right? And everything Christian is bullshit, and so on and so forth. And I go through these motions. Now let me say this. So let me give myself a little bit of empathy and compassion, because my same friend that I was talking about, they told me that, well, you're not really an atheist in the strictest sense. You're a little more fluid than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would
And
agree, your
and
friend.
and so I have to say that, about myself, and give myself some empathy and compassion, but I'm still learning. And so when I watch your videos and I listen to your talks, it's a growing experience for me, because I'm like, okay, I don't want to be galvanized. You know, I don't want to have my features set.
Yeah.
Right? I
Right.
want to be able to change my expression, to change my look, to change my outlook, to change my visage, because that is freedom, right? Because the minute that I wed myself to something, I am saying I'm abrogating my freedom to this principle or this person or this thing. And I don't want to do that. Aaron, I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to be able to navigate, freely between mysticism, between shamanism, between Christianity, between, other faith paradigms, because that is freedom.
Right.
When you're able to embrace. So let me tell you something. I gotta say this, right, because I'm actually building a course around this, right? Being always strategic, but being situationally tactical,
Mm.
right? In
Mhm.
other words, I'm always got my mind on the big picture, but I'm being situationally mindful.
Right.
I have to take these moments where I'm in the moment and understanding what's happening in the moment, but never losing sight of the big picture, right? So I want to be fluid enough to say, okay, here's my overarching strategy. My overarching strategy is I want to help people, and I want to help people be free. Now, that's a strategy, right? What are the things strategically that go into freedom? Helping people to say things that are contrary to the norm, right? Helping people to think thoughts that they ordinarily wouldn't think, or to exercise options that they wouldn't ordinarily take. but being tactical, it says, okay, I need to be here now. I need to
Mhm.
meditate on this moment.
Right.
Okay. And so again, this is something that you epitomize. And for those of you who are watching, again, I'm going to tell you, guys, go watch Aaron's YouTube videos because this is going to help you. But the point that I'm getting at is that in order to be free, freedom, freedom is identified by fluidity.
Yeah.
If you can't be fluid to traverse topics, philosophies, paradigms, if you can't be fluid to go through these things and stop to be mindful to consider these things discreetly, then you, my friend, are not free.
So I'm gonna sum that up in my way, and then we can look at comments. But
Okay.
what I'm hearing is we need to be shapeshifters who are
I love you,
watch
man.
this, but watch this, who are internally governed. There are a lot of shapeshifters that are externally governed.
Yeah,
I want
exactly.
acceptance in the group, so I'm going to shift my shape to fit in with this group. And then when I come over here, I'm going to shift my shape again to fit in with this group. Or I'm going to shift my shape to fit into this relationship. And I'm going to shift my shape to fit into that relationship. And it's all being controlled by other people. That's not freedom.
Yep.
But the ability to shape shift yourself, which is how I'm defining what you're calling tactical, to be in the moment, be in the situation, and implement skills by shape shifting that will advance the strategy that you're trying to follow.
Exactly.
I love it. Love it.
Dude, that I love it when someone can come along and say what I'm saying better than I say it.
I don't know if it's better, it's just different.
Dude, that completely kicked ass. Because here's the thing, right? That your strategy, if you think about this, the way Aaron is saying it, your strategy is what you are, your essence,
Right.
right? Your tactic is your ability to shape shift. To be able to be adaptable, fluid, agile, right? To be able to be in the moment and fully manifest the moment. Dude, it's like, Aaron, that's why I love you, man.
Yeah. Just to help people further, because I know exactly what you're saying. And it's almost football season, so you have to forgive me for that. But when teams go, whatever sport, but I'm gonna pick football, they spend all week developing a game plan. Our game plan is we're going to take away the run on defense. We're
Yep.
going to throw, the ball. We're going to take advantage of the middle of the field because that's where they're weak. And they go through a whole game plan that lays out the 4 quarters, right?
Yep.
But just because you have the game plan, that's the strategy.
Yep.
Just because you have the game plan does not mean you have the tactical ability to carry it out. So the tactics is when you're in the game, can you stop the run?
Can you
Can you
execute?
take advantage of those short, middle route passing lanes that you think are going to be there?
But
Can you?
since we're here on football, I want to say this, right, because this is something that pisses me off, right? Is that teams that live by the check down,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that
In
was
other
Denver
words,
for years, dude.
well, I mean,
That's
Denver was
right.
that way.
Greasy big
Seattle
farmer.
was that way. That basically
Trevor Siemian.
there is no like, okay, I have a
Kyle Orton.
script that says, go ahead.
No, I'm throwing out Denver quarterbacks that have done that over the years. I'm sorry. I'm being a jerk. Go ahead.
No,
I'm
but okay,
venting
so
my
let's
Bronco
let's
bitterness.
let's let's use Denver quarterbacks as a metaphor, right? So John Elway, right? John Elway could throw the check down with the best of them, right?
Right.
But John Elway knew instinctively when, okay, I've softened up the underbelly from the run. Okay, so now I can haul back and air it out, right? And that's the thing. The people, the quarterbacks now that have that sense, that okay, I've absolutely exploited the run.
Right.
Now it's time to air it out. Now it's time to put the ball downfield. And what you'll find is that the quarterbacks that we call legendary, right? These are those guys, right? Is like the Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers can throw checkdowns all day. He can hand off the ball all day. But this guy has a sixth sense that knows that okay, I've softened up the belly with the run. I've lulled them in with the check down. Now I'm gonna put one down the field 40 yards, right? And that's why he's Aaron fucking Rodgers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's tactical. He can execute the strategy.
Yeah, I mean,
That's all I was
it's like
trying to get at.
he
That's all I was
understands
trying
he
to get
understands what his strategy is, but he also understands. Okay, I can make my tactics fluid. In other words, I can be in the moment and make the change.
Yeah, that's freedom, right? I don't have to play within
That's
the
freedom.
structure of the system. Oh, keep going all night. Let's see. Let's look at some of these comments here.
Yeah, man. Marietta Hughes on YouTube. She says, "Go Bills!" Thank you, gentlemen,
Yeah,
for another great Friday. What is Josh's last name? The quarterback of the Bills.
Josh Allen. Josh Allen, who Denver should have taken instead of Bradley Chubb in that
God
draft.
damn it! You know what? I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna predict something, Aaron, and you're not gonna like this because you're AFC, you're a Denver fan,
Yeah.
but God damn it, the Bills are going to the Super Bowl this year. I'm prophetically saying that.
Hey, they got Von Miller now, so I wouldn't mind that. And Denver should have had Josh Allen.
Yeah.
In some alternate universe somewhere where I'm living, I'm watching Josh Allen quarterback the Broncos. All right, I'll get off my football
No,
geeking out
no,
here.
no problem, man. So let's get these comments in.
Let's see. Ben Urban says, I've deconstructed all. Oh, this relates to a previous comment. Ben says, I don't see Jesus. No, it relates to that. He says, I can't explain my affinity for Jesus. I need to go from the bottom up. I can't explain my affinity for Jesus. I don't subscribe to fundamentalism or universalism, but there's a spiritual component to my draw to the Nazarene. Then he says, I don't see Jesus as a savior, but a character that one should aspire to be, not so much for the words attributed to him, but his actions, as actions speak louder than words. And then he comes back and says, I've deconstructed all the core tenets and will never pay any of them any more time. But Jesus remains for me. I don't feel a need to convince anyone or grasp my perspective, and I never will again. So I just want to give a shout out to Ben that he's kind of modeling in the comments what we're talking about.
Yep.
Because you're not, Ben, being you're not adhering to a groupthink. In other words, you're looking at Jesus from your understanding of Scripture or your personal understanding of who he is, and you're honoring the fact that you feel a draw and whatever there. So you're not surrendering that either.
Yeah.
So you're not just following blindly a group religiously, but at the same time, you're free to explore and express your spirituality, even if other people have sort of thrown the whole thing out. So I think those comments really perfectly illustrate what we're talking
So
about.
I want to give Ben a shout out. In addition to there's a guy John Turney, and he's one of two brothers, John and Nate Turney. Both of these guys are really big in the deconstructing movement. But John had posted something about okay, I've shed all the baggage of religion, but I still have Jesus. Now this is what I say about this. Right, is that if the Jesus narrative gives you comfort, if it gives you peace, if it gives you a structure, right? I'm all for that as long as you don't say, okay, I'm throwing out all of the Bible, but I'm holding on to Jesus.
Right.
Because
That's
then that's intellectually dishonest because
right.
you don't know Jesus without the Bible,
Right.
right? But that's where a lot of people are now. They say, well, I look at the Bible as metaphorical, allegorical, but I still love me some Jesus. Okay, if you're going to love Jesus, right, then you have to say, okay, there's something here biblically that I'm cool with, right? And you have to be intellectually honest enough to say that. And I don't mind people that are in that space, that they're intellectually honest. It's when you say, well, I don't need the Bible, but I love Jesus.
Right.
Okay, that to me is a challenge. That to me
Yeah.
is a stretch, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, but my hat tip to Ben
Yeah.
on that.
Good point, though, too, Derek. Good way to nuance that, because that is true. I've heard that a lot, especially in the more progressive, the Bible isn't inerrant. The Bible isn't the word of God. The Bible this, the Bible that, the Bible that. And in other words, I'm not going to adhere to any of the teachings of the Bible or any of the teachings of Jesus, but I love the Jesus that I've snapshotted in my mind.
And let's, let me hashtag that, Aaron. Snapshot.
That's
because
basically what they're
because
saying.
that's the thing. It's like we take a picture and we create a relief of a person, and we
Mhm.
say, okay, this is how I want it to be, right? So we do that not only with people, not only with ideologies, not only with ideas, but we do this with our spiritual paradigm too. That we say, okay, I know Jesus is this, right? So now I'm going to frame Jesus as this, and this is my guardrail. I'm not venturing outside of this.
Yeah.
Joe Mashuda, who I love Joe. Joe challenges me, but Jesus, he says Jesus can be known from the Gnostic writings as well, and some of the Bible is Gnostic in nature. And Joe, I completely agree with you on that. But see, here's the thing, right? What you said is an intellectually honest statement, right?
Exactly.
Because you're saying Gnostic teachings, then that means that there are some writings that frame Jesus or give some context to Jesus, and then you say some of the Bible is Gnostic in nature, and that, my friend, is something that will challenge any religious leader, because they will immediately say, anybody that's in any way steeped in theology, they'll say the Bible is not Gnostic,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
Aaron, this goes back to something that you've been on this there. The Gnostic thread has been running through your teaching for about the
Yes.
last 8 weeks,
Yes, for sure.
right?
Hmm.
So the thing is that what you're saying is that in these Gnostic writings, there's some revelation, there's some understanding, there's something that we can use here, right? But again, if you were saying that as a Christian preacher, immediately you're getting knocked off your square for that,
Yeah.
right? Jeanette says something here. I got to say this one, because I always wonder, where is Jesus's own handwritten journal? Jeanette, I'm gonna be honest with you. That is the Christian comment of 2023. But like me personally, I say, okay, when it comes to Jesus, show me the money, right? In other words, I'm looking for anything other than anecdotal evidence that he exists, and that's a
Yeah.
whole other
Another
subject.
episode.
Yeah.
Marietta says, "Thank you, Mr. Day. I've waited 57 years." I just got to tell you, Marietta, I was on the Jim Kelly bandwagon, man. Those 4 Super Bowls that they went to, and they lost. By the way, Denver lost an AFC championship in Buffalo because I think Rich Carlos, the barefoot kicker, remember him?
Yep. Yep.
He missed a field goal at either in overtime or at the very end of the game that would have put Denver over the top.
Man,
So
let me share a true story with you. I forget what year it was, but the Bills were playing the Houston Oilers, and the Bills had just literally run roughshod over the Oilers for 3 quarters, right? And I shit you not, this is a true story. My Aunt Patty and her boyfriend at the time, they had came to visit us right? And so we were watching the game, and they were like, "Okay, we got to get on the road. We got to get back to New York and all of that, right?" And Patty, if you're watching, you remember this story. Uh, but we left and went outside to see them out, right, and to get them on their way. And Aaron, when I came back, I think the score when I left was like 35-7. When I came back, it was 38-35 Oilers, right? And I'm like, because I'm thinking to myself, this is Jim Kelly's year. This is it, right? And I come
Nothing.
back and the Oilers are up by 3, and I think that they wound up winning by 6. That was like one of the greatest comebacks in NFL history. And the
Yeah.
Bills were wiped out.
Gotta love that vintage football, man. You saw a lot more of that back in that day. Now it's really
No, it's
contained.
all very clinical and technical now. I
Yeah.
think that there was more emotional content in the
Yes.
game when we were younger.
Yes. Totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. Doug says, I think we are evolving consciousness, eventually collectively becoming the God we thought we knew. A much more
Man,
loving version, though. That's good.
Doug, you are the fucking man. I'm just gonna put it out there. You are, dude. So we're evolving consciousness, right, Aaron? So this is one of these things where you and I,
Talk about
we're in the same space, but we butt heads a little bit, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so I agree with you totally about consciousness, but I also believe the consciousness is sentient energy, right? And so anything that's sentient is evolving. Anything that's sentient is growing, right? And so what Doug is saying, we're evolving consciousness, you know, and I think that that's really a really nice dovetail to your philosophy and mine.
yeah. I do too. Andre the Giant just put out there, Derrick, do you believe in astral projection? And then he follows it up with, I'm a huge Derrick fan. So, do
Well,
you believe in astral project? We should do another Q&A next week, maybe.
we should.
Do you believe in astral projection, Derrick Day?
Do I believe in astral projection? I absolutely do. I absolutely do. And a matter of fact, there's a movie with George Clooney. It's called The Men Who Stare at Goats,
Yeah.
and it's sort of a dark comedy, right? It's sort of it's funny, but it's funny in a very dark way. And and so Andre, to your point, I do believe that in astral projection, in other words, that I can leave my body and I can remotely view something. I can remotely look at something. I'm going to share this. My favorite novel of all time is a sci-fi novel by Clifford D. Simak, right? Called "Time Is the Simplest Thing." And in "Time Is the Simplest Thing," there is a future where humans are able to travel uh, through astral projection into faraway worlds, but they are also able to bring back the essence of what they see. And so one of the things that came up in this book is they traveled to a planet that had something that the humans called steak plants. In other words, it was like a root vegetable, but instead of the root being like a beet or a radish or something like that, or a turnip, the root was something that was akin to steak.
Wow.
And they were able to bring that back through a manifestation of what they found through astral projection. So that book changed my life.
Mm.
And as a result, I do believe in astral projection. Absolutely.
Let's see. Anything else we want to address here?
So Andre also says, he says, I've been studying and practicing astral projection for years. I believe it key to unlocking knowledge of the world. I've done remote viewing as well. Now, let me say this, right? Anytime. anytime the CIA devotes some money or resources to something, there's something there. Because one of the things that you have to understand, and I can say this as a former member of the intelligence community of the United States, is that ROI is a big part of intelligence gathering. In other words, I'm not just gathering intelligence for the sake of gathering it. I need to gather it with the intent that this is going to produce some tangible result, right? And so remote viewing, astral projection, all of these things are things that the CIA has invested significant resources, money, and people into. If it's nothing, then why bother?
Yeah.
But there's something there.
See, I don't know. Is it Taryn Jerome Harris or
Yep. Taryn
Tyrone?
Jerome Harris. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. I wasn't sure, Taryn. Sorry if I stumbled with that. But he says, Aaron Tomlinson, since you brought up how the people you know are upset at the changes you and your wife have made in your lives, let them be upset, because the truth of the matter is most of the people we waste so much of our time trying to please won't be around in a decade or two. That's a thought to
It is.
take home with you when you're worried, when you're not exercising your own freedom because you're worried about what people that are not committed to you are going to think.
And just let me say this about Taryn is that he's a cat that if you put aside all the stuff that he hears Derrick and Aaron say or anybody else, this guy would be a huge Christian preacher.
Mm,
I mean, because he has the demeanor, he has a fantastic voice. I just
mm,
want to say, that maybe when we do our documentary, Aaron, we should give him the job of speaking the introductions to different
yeah,
situations
yeah,
because he has a fantastic voice. But he also is a very intelligent thinker, right?
mm,
Um, I think Taryn still has ties to Christian ministry, but he's seeing it beyond that. And I just want to give him a shout out on that because
awesome.
I've watched him evolve over the last 5 or 6 years, and some of the things that watching his change of perspective and the things that he says, it's literally mind blowing. So Terry Pilato Zibik. Now, Zibik, Zbik, that would be Polish or Slavic in
Yeah.
origin, but she says golden handcuffs.
All right. I think we've
Think we
covered.
covered everything?
I think we have.
Yeah.
Oh, Shannon Morris says the reason we are still friends. I think this is in response after Taryn was encouraging me. She says, the reason we are still friends is because I have observed that you are changing. I know you can accept my changes. It's hard though if break contract because of the break contact. It's hard though if we break contact because of the changes. Yeah, yeah, and
Well,
it depends on who someone is in your life too, for
I,
sure.
I, I got to say this on Shannon's behalf too, because Shannon is somebody that has really come a long way. Because I know when she saw how you and I have veered away from Christianity, I know that initially that was kind of shocking to her, but now she's on the journey, right?
She's a she's a free thinker for sure. I've watched,
Yep.
by the same token, I've watched her evolve and be challenged on multiple levels, not just with religion, but other issues as well. And she's hung in there, and she's finding her own way.
So I'm going to say one more from Ben Urban. Ben says, I'm at peace, waiting in the infinity pool, drifting back and forth between casual theism and curious agnosticism.
Yeah, I've heard him say that before.
And I'm with that. It's like here's the thing, right? Like if you look at a Gartner Magic Quadrant, right?
Hmm.
You have uh, you have atheism and theism, and then that's bifurcated by agnostic uh, theism and agnostic atheism, right?
Right.
And so for me, I tend to be an agnostic atheist, excuse me, that skews toward Gnostic atheism. In other words, I'm pretty convinced that there is no God,
Right.
but I also believe that there is the possibility of a higher power, and this goes back to what you're saying, Aaron, about consciousness. And you and I, we've talked about that privately and publicly. That I do believe in a higher consciousness. I believe that we're, and so the way that I like to frame this is that um, in quantum physics they have this thing that's called unified field theory, or
Hmm.
the theory of everything,
Hmm.
right? And the unified field theory says, okay, there's this field, and we all exist in this field, and that there are manifestations in this field. And some of these fields or some of these manifestations are waves, right? In other words, some energy or force within this field, and some are particles. In other words, it's a physical manifestation, right?
Right.
And so I'm of the mindset that that we just like light are both waves and particles. So, I believe in the unified field theory, and I also I believe in the spiritual implications and ramifications of that.
Mm, I like that.
So,
All right, buddy. Shall we bid our
land the
adieu and
plane.
thank everybody for coming to our TED Talk, and peace and hair grease and all that good stuff.
All right, love y'all.
Love you guys.
See you.